Good morning. It's good to be with you this morning. My name is Dana Maddox, and I'm a member of this congregation and its anti-racism ministry team. As we gather together this morning, let me share with you a poem by Arlen Goff. Thresholds. We cross them every day, from room to room, from outside to inside, and back again. From here to there, from anywhere and everywhere, from age to age. Each threshold offers an opportunity for change, for renewal, for transformation. From what we were and what we are to what we can be. In this hour and in this place, we cross a threshold from our day-to-day everydayness into space and time attuned to the other, to the sacred, to the holy, into an awareness of new life, pregnant with possibilities. How will we be renewed in this moment? How will we be changed by this hour? Will we be transformed through this gathering of beloved community? Come, you longing, thirsty souls. Come, let us worship together.
Many rivers to cross, I can't seem to find my way over. Wandering I am lost as I travel along the white cliffs of Dover. Many rivers to cross, it's only my will that keeps me alive. Been licked, washed up for years, and I merely survived because of my pride. This loneliness won't leave me alone. It's such a drag to be out on your own. My woman let me in, she would not say why. I guess I just have to try. Many rivers to cross, but just where to begin? I'm playing for time. There've been times I find myself thinking of committing some dreadful crime. This loneliness won't leave me alone. And it's such a drag to be out on your own. My woman let me in, she did not say why. I guess I'll just have to try. Many rivers to cross, but it's only my will that's kept me alive. I've been licked, washed up for years,
The flaming chalice is a symbol of Unitarian Universalist tradition, the liberal religious tradition to which this congregation belongs. Please join me in reciting the words on the screen. If you have a chalice at home, I invite you to light it with me at this time. As we kindle this flame, we recommit ourselves to the mission of this congregation, to build a Unitarian Universalist community that transforms lives and empowers people to serve the world. May the light of this flame be welcoming to all who seek a liberal religious home. Please join us in singing our first hymn, Wake Now My Senses. The words are on the screen.
Wake now my senses and hear the earth call. Feel the deep power of being in all. Keep with the web of creation your vow. Giving, receiving as love shows us how. Wake now my reason, reach out to the new. Join with each pilgrim who quests for the true. Honor thy beauty and wisdom of time. Suffer thy limit and praise the sublime. Wake now, compassion, give heed to the cry. Voices of suffering fill the wide sky. Take as your neighbor both stranger and friend, praying and striving their hardships to end.
Good morning. I'm Sandy Pierce, and I'm a member of this congregation. Whether you are joining us on your smartphones, your laptop, or your TV, whether you are here in Raleigh or joining us from elsewhere in North Carolina or elsewhere in the world, we're glad you're here this morning. If you're visiting for the first time this morning, I'd like to offer you a special welcome. Here at the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Raleigh, we are intentionally inclusive, liberally religious, and actively seeking the common good of our shared world. That means that whoever you are and wherever you are on your own religious journey, you are welcome here. That also means that as Unitarian Universalists, we seek wisdom and inspiration from many sources, but affirm our own individual experience and conscience as the best authority for our beliefs. That also means that we are committed to making our world more compassionate and just, and hope you might join one of our efforts to do so. If you are new to us, I invite you to fill out our visitor form at www.uufr.org/visitor-form. If you do this, you will receive our weekly e-newsletter. Periodically, we organize lay-led services at UUFR. This lay-led service has been in the works for several months. Our on-site worship team today includes Dana Maddox, David Patorti, Sarah Ford Knorr, Mark Long, Ken Walsh, and Billy Lyles, Bill McMillan, and Eric Dyke. Behind the scenes, assisting with slides, videos, and camera, are Kathy Murphy, Sage Levick, Zane Patorti, and Jan Piskovich. Our worship theme today is Thresholds. It's one of the themes from the Soul Matters network of Chalice Circles and Family Ministry. Now is a good time for me to remind you that you can register until July 31st to participate in a Chalice Circle, a group of 8 to 10 people who meet monthly by Zoom right now for deep listening and spiritual exploration together. There is a link to register in our weekly e-Chalice and on our website under Chalice Circles. Please feel free to join us for our social hour immediately after the service. There are instructions on how to do this on our website. Although we can't greet each other in person this morning, at this time I'd like to invite you to greet one another using the chat function on your screen.
Our story for all ages today is Old Joe and the Carpenter, written by Pleasant L. Despain. Old Joe lived way out in the countryside, and he had one good neighbor. They'd been friends all their lives, and now that their spouses were buried and their children raised, all they had left were their farms and each other. But for the first time, they'd had an argument. It was over a stray calf that neither one really needed. It seemed as though the calf was found on Joe's neighbor's land, so he claimed it as his own. But old Joe said, "No, that calf has the same markings as my favorite cow, and I recognize it as being mine." Well, they were both a bit stubborn, so they just stopped talking to each other. It seemed that a dark cloud had settled over old Joe, until there came a knock on his door 1 week later. He wasn't expecting anybody that morning, and as he opened the door, he saw a young woman who had a box of tools on her shoulder. She had a kind voice and dark, deep eyes, and she said, "I'm a carpenter, and I'm looking for a bit of work. Maybe you have some small jobs that I can help out with." Old Joe brought her into the kitchen and sat her down and gave her some stew that he had on the back of his stove. There was also home-cooked bread, fresh churned butter, and homemade jam. While they were eating and talking, Joe decided that he liked this young carpenter, and he said, "I do have a job for you. Look right there through my kitchen window. See that farm over there? That's my neighbor's place. And you see that creek running right down between our property lines? That creek, it wasn't there last week. My neighbor did that to spite me. He took his plow up there and he dug a big old furrow from the upper pond and he flooded it. Well, I want you to do one better. Since he wants us divided that way, you go out there and build me a fence, a big, tall fence, so I won't even have to see his place anymore." And the carpenter said, "Well, if you have the lumber and the nails, I've got my tools, and I'll be able to build something that you'll like." Joe had to go to town to get some supplies, so he hitched up the wagon and he showed the carpenter where everything was in the barn. The carpenter carried everything she needed down to the creek and started to work. The carpenter's work went smooth and fast. She did her measuring and her sawing and her nailing. And it was about sunset when old Joe returned and the carpenter had finished her work. When old Joe pulled up in his wagon, his eyes opened wide and his mouth fell open. There wasn't a fence there at all. It was a bridge going from one side of the creek to the others. It had handrails and all, a fine piece of work. And his neighbor was just starting to cross the bridge with his hand stuck out, and he was saying, "Joe, you're quite a fellow to build this bridge. I'd have never been able to do that. I'm so glad we're going to be friends again." And Joe, he put his arms around his neighbor and he said, "Oh, that calf is yours. I've known it all the time. I just want to be your friend too." About that time, the carpenter started putting her tools in the box and then hoisted it onto her shoulder and started to walk away. And Joe said, "Wait, come on back, young carpenter. I want you to stay on. I've got lots of projects for you." The carpenter just smiled and said, "I'd like to stay on, Joe, but you see, I can't. I've got more bridges to build." So she walked on, and there ends my tale.
This is the time in our service when we acknowledge some of the joys and sorrows of our community. If you'd like to share an individual joy or sorrow, I'd invite you to do so now using the chat function on the screen. I'd also like to share some joys and sorrows that we received by email. Louise Lockwood Zarowski shares that her husband came home 10 days ago from the hospital after being in the hospital for 8 days. He is still in a great deal of pain because of severe edema in his leg and many wounds. Let's send healing wishes to Louise's husband, and may we hold them in our hearts. Bob Fitzgerald shares that his wife, Gail, fell on Friday evening and broke her hip. She had surgery to repair it Saturday morning and is recovering at Wake Med. Let's send healing wishes to Gail as well. Reverend Sasha's partner's mother died unexpectedly this past week in Arizona. Reverend Sasha is still on vacation, but may we hold Reverend Sasha and Smokey in our thoughts and prayers during this time of grief. Congratulations to Jane Harrison for being selected as one of the Raleigh City Council candidates to participate in this afternoon's public forum about the vacancy on the City Council. Reverend James and Reverend Sasha would like to remind everyone that they will never, never, never email any of you asking to buy gift cards for anyone for any reason. They would also like to remind you that their spelling and punctuation skills are much better than those of the email scammers pretending to be them. Please be aware of scam emails purporting to be from anyone at UUFR. As we reflect on these shared joys and sorrows, as well as the joys, sorrows, and fears and hopes of our own lives, let's be together for a time of stillness and silence, opening ourselves to Spirit within us, between us, and amidst us, called by many names, but known to every human heart, that leads us toward a fuller experience of life. After the silence, we'll sing hymn 1011, Return Again, But now let's be together in stillness and silence.
Return again, return to the home of your soul. Return again, return again, return to the home of your soul. Return to who you are, return to what you are, return to where you are, born and reborn again.
Everything we do at UUFR is only possible because of the generous financial support so many of you provide. However, we designate one Sunday each month as Justice Sunday, and all the money collected during our offering is given to a local or national nonprofit organization. Today is our Justice Sunday, and our Justice Council has designated the U.S. Commission on Refugees and Immigrants as the recipients of today's offering. This video will tell us a little more. It's an interview with Timothy by Glow. The audio quality of the video is not as good in some parts, so you may need to turn up your volume for clarity. We try to make being generous as convenient as possible.
Hi, my name is Glow and I work with the Refugee Resettlement Agency in the Triangle. You may have met me by reading last month's social justice blog. So today I'm going to introduce you to the father of the refugee family that's arrived in Raleigh in December 2019 and lives in this apartment here of Cedar Point, and that your congregation so kindly furnished. Okay? All right. Bonjour.
Merci.
Okay. Vous allez bien? Okay. Okay. So, premièrement, merci beaucoup d'avoir accepté de nous parler aujourd'hui. Et c'est avec plaisir de vous voir avec votre famille et s'installer dans votre appartement. So, je voudrais vous poser cette question sur votre expérience avant et après la réinstallation aux États-Unis. Okay? Première question. Il y a combien de personnes dans votre famille?
Nous sommes au nombre de 8.
8? Okay, so you're saying that there are like 8 of them. Okay, so donc il y a vous, votre femme et les enfants.
Oui,
c'est ça?
je suis arrivé ici le 13 Décembre, le 31 décembre, j'ai mis au monde le sexe masculin
Okay, so
américain.
yeah, so it was just explaining that he arrived here in December, and he has a newborn baby. So there's him, his wife, and some of the rest of the kids. Okay, all right.
États-Unis, c'est bien.
US
Je
is
suis
really
arrivé là.
good.
Je suis très content pour
I'm very happy
venir avec mes enfants pour
to be here with my kids. You know, like I know that my kids will have like proper education, so that's one thing that I've been praying for. So I'm very happy to be here. Okay, saying that he's very comfortable. He was so happy to find everything already like furnished. So that's something that he did not expect. So he was very happy to see the apartment being furnished. Okay. Et alors les enfants se sont sentis comment?
les enfants sont normaux.
Yeah. I also asked about the kids how they felt, and they said that everybody was feeling happy. Yeah.
Je dis seulement, ils sont mon coton. J'ai mis avec mes enfants. Là, c'est normal.
Say that like he's just happy now that he's with his family. He tried to spend time with his kids, and his wife, and he feels safe. It's a safe place. And having the opportunity, of course, to work, to provide for his family, and seeing his kids being in school, to receive like free, proper education. So he's really happy about that.
Bon, ce que je vais leur dire, un grand merci beaucoup.
What I want to tell you guys is really like a big thank you. Thank you so much for what you guys have done. Okay.
Je vous le donne un grand merci.
Yeah, just
Comme
want
je
to say
suis dans la
big thank
brousse,
you.
je ne sais pas si Dieu nous mène
Yeah.
à la prière de ceux qui sont là.
So
Thank
I've
you,
been
Mama.
just praying for you guys. That's all I can really do at this moment. I'm very grateful, to everything that you guys have done for me and my family. D'autres choses? Okay, so that's it. Your Justice Sunday's donation today will go to to USCRI that help people like Timothy and his family when they arrive after their arduous journeys from war on their homelands to refugee camps. These funds will support the counselors like me, case workers, and the other people who help them settle and integrate into the community. These activities include learning English, establishing a home, finding work, and settling children in schools. The money you donate today will make this possible for many refugees' families. This is a simple way for you to recognize the inherent worth and dignity of every person.
I invite you to see the instructions that will appear on your screen during our offertory. It is now time for our offering. Please give generous.
God is in the roses, the petals and the thorns, storms out on the ocean, souls who will be born, and every drop of rain that falls for those who mourn. God is in the roses and the thorns. The sun is on the cemetery, the leaves are on the stones, God is in the roses and the thorns. I love you like a brother, a father and a son. Well, it may not last forever, but it never will be done. My whole world fits inside the moment I saw you be reborn. God is in the roses, and that day was filled with roses. God is in the roses and the thorns.
Our first reading this morning is a quote from poet John O'Donohue. A threshold is not a simple boundary. It is a frontier that divides two different territories, rhythms and atmospheres. Indeed, it is a lovely testimony to the fullness and integrity of an experience of a state of life, that it intensifies towards the end into real frontier that cannot be crossed without the heart being passionately engaged and woken up. At this threshold, a great complexity of emotion comes alive: confusion, fear, excitement, sadness, hope. Our second reading is The Welcoming Path by Buddhist monk Thich Nhat Hanh. The empty path welcomes you, fragrant with grass and little flowers. The path paved with paddy fields, still bearing the marks of your childhood and the fragrance of mother's hand. Walk leisurely, peacefully. Your feet touch the earth deeply. Don't let your thoughts carry you away. Come back to the path every moment. The path is your dear friend. She will transmit you her solidity and her peace.
My name is Ken Walsh, and I'm a member of this congregation, reading from the Reverend Maureen Killeron while she led the UU congregation of Asheville in 1997. Pilgrimage. Take yourself to a place where tourists do not go. Leave behind umbrellas, luggage, your address book, ID. Take only what you can carry on your back. If you are lucky, you will not return. Or failing that, you will not return unchanged. Take yourself into the woods where maps fail and there is no sound but the promising of rain. Let your feet carry you to the entrance of a cave. Sit there and listen to what the cave will say. Sit there, listen. It is for this moment that you were born. It is for this moment that life has called you to this place. Sit, listen, know your presence as your prayer. Sit, listen, feel. On a hot summer day, feel the cool air blowing low across the place where you sit. Your right hand on a cool gray rock traces the breeze 7 feet back up the hillside to the mouth of a cave. A blowing breeze from a cave mouth is often a sign that the cave extends for long distances, although maybe not in human size. Since 1983, I've been exploring Appalachian caves and would like to invite you inside to show you how I find my thin place. I'm not talking about that tight spot in the cave where I need to exhale to push my chest through, but about a certain type of threshold. The ancient Celts viewed thin places as locations or days of the year where the veil diminished between the world and the spiritual realm, and they could encounter those who had gone before them. When we talk about thin places, some think about the Mexican Day of the Dead celebrations. On our subterranean journey, I'll guide you inside the cave entrance and wait 2 minutes for your eyes to adjust to your helmet's lamp and for the fog to clear from your glasses. You'll notice a downward sloping, muddy floor and hear a stream traveling somewhere below. Staying seated, you'll find plenty of friction as you scoot against the mud-caked floor, all the way down to the clear, chilly stream, and you'll wish you'd worn waterproof boots today. Splashing upstream, I escort you past ghostly white stalactites and bulbous stalagmites until stopping you at a bare section of wall. This is where I find my thin place. Look closely at the wall of sedimentary rock and notice thin horizontal stripes and count roughly 20 layers piling to just an inch high. Some are as black as night and others the blue-gray color of a partly cloudy day. Each quarter inch represents more than 100 years of deposits on an ancient seafloor, longer than a human lifetime. Can you even fathom how many days comprise a lifetime? I direct your gaze to what I think is a fraction of a trilobite fossil, if you look real close. But now I ask you to tilt back from the wall. As you lean backward, you realize that there may be several hundred layers, 5,000 years in just 1 foot of deposits. As you further step back, you realize that the ceiling rises 40 feet above us, all once the bottom of a shallow ocean. We are looking at more than 200,000 years of ocean deposits. What does that mean to you? For me, the importance of going back to work on Monday melts away. Because I am staring at eons from 400 million years ago. This thin place begins for me by observing 1 human lifetime, which then is compounded 2,000 times as I crane my neck upward. You, I, and today are just an infinitesimal fraction of the history that the trilobite has experienced. I find thin places where I can melt into my very small role and focus on the enormity around me. Together, we can count back the lifetimes and find that small ancestral message, I was here. I'm marveling at that same trilobite fossil that may have been seen by a War of 1812 soldier who mined saltpeter here. I've visited caves that Thomas Jefferson drew the first maps for. Where have you been that let you touch the past? Why is this special to me? Messages from the past transcend lifetimes, and by so doing, convince me that all creatures can share across boundaries. Messages connect to me from completely different worlds, when the Appalachian Mountains were beneath the ocean, and in the early years of our nation. Those worlds were nothing like our own. yet we all share a place. After I embrace that another world coexists right here, I can believe that otherworldly dimensions share this location too. I can explore beyond what can be seen or felt. The divine? Can you feel the same connectedness in your thin place? Recall that a thin place reduces the veil between our world and the spiritual realm. Because time stands still in my thin place, you and I can sit and listen and feel that our existence within and outside time is greater than we can grasp. Sit, listen, feel the cool air blowing from the past.
Good morning. My name is Sarah Ford Knorr, and I'm a member of this congregation. Those of us using the Soul Matters curriculum in our Chalice circles have been working our way through a series of spiritual exercises designed to help us think thoughtfully about our lives and the world. When we studied thresholds, one of the exercises was to find a picture of yourself after having gone through an important threshold, or perhaps right in the middle of it. A picture taken at a graduation, or a wedding, or during the era of a divorce, a retirement, a stint abroad, regardless, a time of transition when there was a clear before and after. The summer that Cindy died, the last time we went to the lake. For the exercise, you would look at the pictures of yourself taken during that threshold era and ask, what do I notice about myself as I look at this picture again? How did that person think? What would I go back and tell that person if I could? Of course, it's hard to think about the past when the present is screaming its head off. I could think only of the great threshold time in which we all live today, the era of the coronavirus pandemic, COVID world. The before of meetings and handshakes and a shared plate at a restaurant, and the after of stay-at-home orders and hand sanitizer and missing each other. We should all make an effort to take some pictures of this time, of Zoom calls, walking in your neighborhood, maybe of your spouse trying to figure out one of your kids' remote learning websites. And for photo albums that may be pored over by historians and great-great-grandchildren alike, you should take a picture of someone wonderful who should always be remembered, someone you love, with their eyes smiling at you above their mask. Of course, truly documentary photos of you in this threshold, of me in this threshold, would show some unseemly late-night ice cream binges, some quiet weeping in the car, some shouting matches with family members unlucky enough to be within range when our frustration with life boiled over. And if the photographer was good, really good, some photos of this time would show fear and worry in our eyes. We pass through this threshold and we know not what the future holds. Infection rates rise, budgets shrink, legacies of racial injustice haunt us relentlessly, and the emperor has no clothes. Day after day, a cascade of new developments and controversies tumbles past us in a never-ebbing water flow of sickness and ruin and vitriol. It takes me back to something that Frodo said to Gandalf a long time ago. I wish it need not have happened in my time, said Frodo. So do I, said Gandalf. And so do all who live to see such times. But that is not for them to decide. All we have to decide is what to do with the time we are given. If you are familiar with the work of Viktor Frankl, the eminent Viennese psychiatrist, you will hear in Gandalf's words a very decent encapsulation of Frankl's theory regarding how to find meaning in life by choosing your response to hardship. Everything can be taken from a man but one thing, Frankl wrote, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way. Frankl had some authority on how bad circumstances could become. Between 1942 and 1945, he labored in 4 different concentration camps, including Auschwitz, while his parents, his brother, and his pregnant wife perished. The full paragraph reads like this: "We who lived in concentration camps can remember the men who walked through the huts, comforting others, giving away their last piece of bread. They may have been few in number, but they offer sufficient proof that everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way." It's July 12th, 2020, and we know not what the future holds for the struggle for racial justice, for the election, for the course of the virus. But because we can choose our own way, I say to you this morning, courage, dear hearts, courage. It's a privilege to live in a time of great upheaval, of great threat and great need. It's a privilege to live at a time when men and women must be bold to speak. And as Unitarian Universalists, we were made for this. We love to speak. And it just so happens that our Unitarian Universalist principles are an antidote to the venom in our suffering world. You know them, but have you looked at them lately? They read like the lighted lampposts of a solid path in a terrifying, dark, and treacherous march. The inherent worth and dignity of every person. Justice, equity, and compassion in human relations. Acceptance of one another. A free and responsible search for truth. The right of conscience, the goal of world community, and respect for the interdependent web of existence of which we are a part. Whatever the future holds for us, I believe that this community will continue to live into those values. Although I'm a relatively new member, I love you, UFR. This fellowship of people who care and who think. Each of us striving to live our shared values in ways large and small, public and private. I trust that we will choose anew to live those values this afternoon and tomorrow morning and every morning that our eyes are blessed to see. Beyond this threshold, there may be dragons, but we can meet those dragons boldly. We know who we are and who we will always choose to be. So get some pictures this week of threshold living to look back on when this time is at last behind us. Your yard, your online grocery order, the sewing machine, the toolbox. Get a picture of yourself, maybe in your COVID wear sweatpants, but with courage in your eyes, your face alight with confidence in the values by which we choose to live. All we have to decide is what to do with the time that is given us. Amen.
Good morning. I'm Mark Long, a friend of this congregation, and I have an allegory from Frederick Buechner, a Presbyterian minister who has touched my soul. 100 years ago, we stood on a threshold, reeling from a world war and deadly pandemic. 50 years ago, we stood on another threshold, reeling from assassinations, civil rights and Vietnam War protest, and violent oppression. Now we're struggling toward another threshold, and Frederick Buechner's allegory on the myth of Noah's Ark gives us a useful perspective on our journey through this storm. A sprig of hope. Then finally, after many days, Noah sent forth a dove from the ark to see if the waters had subsided from the earth. And that evening she returned, and lo, in her mouth a freshly plucked olive branch. Once again, for the last time, the place to look, I think, is Noah's face. The dove stands there with her delicate scarlet feet on the rough calluses of his upturned palm. His cheek just brushes her breast so that he can feel the tiny panic of her heart. His eyes are closed, the lashes watery wet. Only what he weeps with now, the old clown, is no longer anguish, but wild and irrepressible hope. That is not the end of the story in Genesis, but maybe that is the end of it for most of us. Just a little sprig of hope held up against the end of the world. And the turbulent water of chaos and nightmare are always threatening to burst forth and flood the earth. We hardly need the tale of Noah to tell us that. The New York Times tells us just as well, and our own hearts tell us too, because chaos and nightmare have their little days there also. But the tale of Noah tells us other truths as well. It tells about the ark, for one, which somehow managed to ride out the storm. God knows the ark is not much. If anybody knows it is not much, God knows. And the old joke seems true, that if it were not for the storm without, you could never stand the stench within. But the ark was enough, is enough, because the ark is wherever human beings come together as human beings in such a way that the differences between them stop being barriers. The way if people meet at a wedding, say, of someone they both love, all the differences of age between them, all the real and imagined differences of color, of wealth, of education, no longer divide them, but become for each a source of great strength and delight. And although they may go right on looking at each other as very odd fish indeed, it becomes an oddness to gladden the heart. And there is no shyness anymore, no awkwardness or fear of each other. Sometimes, even in a church, we can look into each other's faces and see that beneath the differences, we are all of us outward bound on a voyage for parts unknown. The ark is wherever people come together because there is a stormy world where nothing stays put for long among the crazy waves, and where at the end of a very long voyage there is a burial at sea. The ark is where, just because it is such a world, we really need each other and know very well that we do. The ark is wherever human beings come together because in their heart of hearts, all of them, white and black, Russian and American, hippie and square, dream the same dream, which is a dream of peace. Peace between the nations, between the races, between the brothers, and thus ultimately a dream of love. Love, not as an excuse for the mushy and innocuous, but love as a summons to battle against all that is unlovely and unloving in the world. We must build our arks with love and ride out the storm with courage, and know that the little sprig of green in a dove's mouth betokens a reality beyond the storm, more precious than the likes of us can imagine. Thank you.
Number 128, For All That Is Our Life. Join us in singing our closing hymn.
For all that is our life, we sing our thanks and praise. For all life is a gift, we build the common good and make our own days glad. For needs which others serve, services we give, for work and its rewards, for hours of rest and love, we come with praise and thanks for all that is our life. For sorrow we must bear, for other failures new thing we learn, for fearful hours that pass, we come with praise and thanks for all that is our life. For all that is our life, we sing with thanks and praise, for all life is a gift which we are called to use to build the common good and make our own days glad.
Well, as you can see, a lay-led service at UUFR takes a village. And I want to thank everyone who contributed to this service. Our closing words are from the Soul Matters Worship Resource Materials, a quote by Valerie Carr. And in my darkest night, when the moon was covered and I roamed through wreckage, a nimbus-clouded voice directed me. Live in the layers, not on the litter. And though I lacked the art to decipher it, no doubt the next chapter in my book of transformations is already written. I am not done with my changes. What if this darkness is not the darkness of the tomb, but the darkness of the womb? What if our America is not dead, but a country still waiting to be born? What if the story of America is one strong labor?
sunny day. Keep smiling through, just like you always do, till the blue skies drop and dark clouds far away. So would you please say hello to the folks that I know? Tell them I won't be long. They'll be happy to know that as you saw me go, I was singing this song. We'll meet again, don't know where, don't know when, but I know we'll meet again some sunny day. So will you please say hello to the folks that I know? I won't be long. They'll be happy to know that as you saw me